Hello, everybody. This is William Hempill with the Empowered Life with William YouTube channel. And today we want to continue our series on the freedom of forgiveness. And this is part 5 of this series. And it says simply grieving the loss, giving our heart time to heal. Forgiveness is powerful, but forgiveness is not magic. Even after we release a debt, there is still a wound. In Matthew chapter 18, when the king forgives the servant, he cancels the debt, but the loss is still real. The money is gone, and the king has to deal with the loss of that money. And the impact from that loss also still remains. And so I like to say one of the hardest parts of forgiveness is this. After we forgive, when the pain is still there, or when the emotions come back, and we are left grieving what was lost. I like to say that forgiveness handles the offense, but grief handles the impact. And so we think about this, and we're talking about Matthew 18:27, Matthew 18:27, where it says the following, and out of pity for him, the Lord of the servant released him and forgave the debt. The scripture says that the master or the Lord took pity upon the servant, released him, let go of the debt. It doesn't say that the king was fine. It really tells us that he was moved emotionally and had some compassion. The king was moved enough to have mercy and grace that he was saying, I will take this financial and emotional blow so you can have freedom. The king absorbed the financial and emotional blow, but still had to face the loss. Grace still has grief attached to it. So some points we want to talk about briefly. Number one, we can forgive fully and still hurt deeply. We've said this before in other passages or other teachings. Forgiveness doesn't erase our memory, it just invites healing. We are not designed to forgive and forget. We have memory so that we can learn from different events that occur in life. So when someone tells us to forgive and forget, I like to say that's giving us a teaching that can actually harm us because oftentimes we think we haven't forgiven because we don't forget. Or in worst cases, I've seen offended parties say, well, you didn't forgive me because you didn't forget what happened. That's not true. We have memory. We are designed to remember so we can learn and grow. Forgiveness then doesn't erase memory, it just invites healing. Hurt doesn't vanish instantly. Feelings do not follow the calendar, and pain is not disobedience. I often talk about this when I work with couples and they're dealing with affairs. I often tell them measure healing not how you feel today, but how do you feel a month from now? 2 months from now, 5 months from now, a year from now? Can you trust more fully than you did in that particular moment? Because if you have less hurt and can trust more fully, then you understand that the forgiveness and the healing is working together as a process. Because when we are hurt deeply or injured emotionally deeply, it takes time to heal, time and work. So, the first point, we can forgive fully and still hurt deeply. Second point, forgiveness is a decision. Grief, though, is a process. Forgiveness is one moment, but grief is many moments and can show up at different times. I was actually looking on social media, I think it was about a week or two ago, Wasn't thinking about anything, just probably escaping from doing some work for a few minutes. And I'm looking on social media, and then I get this flashback. I see all these pictures of my family, and I see all of these pictures of my mother. And I immediately ask, why am I seeing all these pictures? And then I stop and remember it was the anniversary of her passing. Now, she passed over a decade ago, and so I've learned to live without her earthly presence, my mother's earthly presence. But that was a grief moment for me because when I figured out what it was, I had to stop and sit down, grieve, and then I was okay. Grief has many moments. Even though my mother passed away over a decade ago, moments like that can still come up. The same thing when we have grief after harm or offense. Something may trigger us. Something may hit us a certain way at a certain time. It doesn't mean that we haven't forgiven. It's just that grief has moments when it shows up. Forgiveness removes the chain, but grief removes the sting, and God honors both of them. It's a process. When we're trying to get healing from an offense, sometimes we have to grieve what was lost. That brings me to point three. Grief names what was lost. We have to acknowledge the wounds in our souls and our hearts so that God can begin the work in us. Some losses to mention. We might have lost safety in that process. We might have lost respect in that process. We might have lost trust of someone in the process. We might have lost time in that process, time we can't get back. Maybe we lost innocence. Maybe we lost dreams of how things should have been. Maybe we lost expectations. There's so many things that we can grieve when offense occurs. And grief names what was lost. And one of the things I like to say is we acknowledge the wounding of what was lost so we can begin to get healing in our hearts from the pain of what was lost. You can't heal what you refuse to feel. You can't heal what you refuse to feel. In other words, if we refuse to acknowledge it, the healing process can't begin inside of us. Number four, tears are not weakness, they are release. Grief is how heaven drains the infection of the heart. I'm not sure who said that, but it seems to be a very powerful quote. And so I just wanted to share it here. Grief is how heaven drains the infection of the heart. Our emotions are messengers. I like to say they let us know that something's going on. It's not necessarily that our emotions are right, they're not necessarily wrong, but they just let us know that something is going on. And grief, when we release with tears, when we release with sadness, when we release with weakness, that begins to heal our heart. And grief can be an act of gratitude and worship when directed even toward the Lord. So tears are not weakness, they are release. And then point five, forgiveness frees the future, and grief heals the past. Forgiveness opens the door, and grief helps us to walk through it. I almost like to say grief in some ways is kind of a resetting process. It's a way to release the old and to begin again in the new. So forgiveness then prevents us from dealing with future bondage to bitterness. Grief acknowledges the past and allows us to heal from the pain of the past. So If I wanted to give a transformation statement, I might say this: forgiveness releases the offender, grief releases the offense. As we reflect and start to close on this teaching, I want us to sit back for a moment and maybe think about what offenses we may have faced. How has someone hurt us? Ask ourselves a question: what did I lose in this hurt? And after we acknowledge that, then we can pray, Lord, heal the part of me that forgiveness uncovered. It's okay to feel it. It's okay to cry. It's okay to let it go because God sees our tears. If this teaching has helped you to heal or has made you think more about forgiveness, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone else who may need some help with forgiveness, healing, and even expressing grief. Number two, there's a link in the description box, The Confidence Walk. Please click on that link to purchase the book, The Confidence Walk, to help you deepen your spiritual and emotional journey, to help you walk in complete and consistent confidence. And finally, if you want to know more about how to book me to speak, go to www.williamhemphill2.com or reach out to my admin at admin1 at Faith and Family Empowerment. Thank you so much for listening to this today. Remember that forgiveness doesn't erase the wound, it gives us room to heal. And sometimes that healing comes from grief and dealing with grief. Remember to love God, to love people, and to love yourself. Take care. God bless you.